you said that the root of sculpting is drawing.
Mhm.
Is that simply sort of practical happenstance, or is there something more fundamental? In other words, is it just as a practical matter that to plan a work, drawing is convenient, or is there something deeper to it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly drawing is convenient and it helps get ideas out. But you know, you could say that when you're modeling something in clay, like a little clay model, you're drawing in clay. You're drawing in 3 dimension. Basically, what you're doing is you're drawing, but you're bringing it out to to all 365 view. Um, and really, I mean, it's interesting because there's different approaches to this, right? So um, when you're you're drawing on a surface, a flat, pad of paper, and often sculpture should be actually approached the same way. That even if a sculpture is in the round, that meaning that you could walk around it, you can still approach it in terms of how you're bringing out the forms as if you're drawing on a flat surface. You almost make it as if it's a relief, which is kind of a shallow sculpture that is flat, like basically like a drawing. But a sculpture that you can walk around is simply just fully realized. And sometimes in my own experience, in terms of how I've composed little clay mock-ups, is I'll start with a big block of clay, and then I'll literally draw on the side of the clay, just with a stick or whatever, just feel the figure, and then start building out the figure from that drawing. And that drawing becomes the source from which all other aspects of the piece flow. It's almost like there's a sheet of paper an invisible sheet of paper that slides, through the center of the sculpture. And whatever's coming forward or receding from you is coming out of that invisible sheet of paper. I know maybe this is a little too abstract.
So there's like axes that you're working on.
Kind of, yeah. And it's a directional axis. It has a directional view. And that's kind of the drawing. I think to me that's the clearest way you could connect 3-dimensional sculpture to drawing. But really they're fundamentally the same thing.
Right. Are there any sculptors who would say, no, sculpting is a 3-dimensional art. It must start in its initial conception in 3 dimensions. I will never work from drawing because I'm somehow adulterating my sculpture with the principles of a different art form if I start with a drawing.
Well, I would say that they wouldn't understand. They wouldn't understand what they're saying because, drawing is basically it's thought on a page, right? You're thinking and you're analyzing how to express something, and fundamentally, sculpture is just an extension of that in real space. But essentially, it's the same problem. So to say drawing, I guess it's a question of terminology. You're saying drawing is basically literally what you draw on a page with charcoal or whatever, which is true.
Uh-huh.
But what I'm saying is that drawing also has some kind of metaphysical reality that you can be drawing in 3D, but it's still the same problems of drawing intellectually.
To me, it sounds like somebody's making writing a script for a film, and a film is not a piece of literature, but it has this literary concept behind it. But yet the person has to write it as though it's going to be a film and not as though it's going to be a novel. So so when you're drawing, you are drawing with 3 dimensions in mind, even though literally on the page it's 2 dimensions.
Right.
You are still doing as concept for a 3-dimensional work, and you can do it in such a way that it's not leading you by nature to think in 2 dimensions.
I think exactly. I mean, I think that the easiest way to understand it, though, is that it's the easiest way to learn how to think in visual forms is drawing, because it's simple, it's on the page, and you can express things. And then sculpture is an extension of that, basically. You could say, in theory, just skip literal drawing altogether and go straight to sculpting, and still be, in a way, drawing in sculpture. But it makes more sense in a literal context to start with drawing, to learn to understand. And many, obviously many artists use drawing regularly. There were a few sculptors that did not, or that we don't really know of. I know Houdon and Clodion, who were two contemporary sculptors, Rococo, French sculptors. We really don't have very many drawings attributed to them. And when they both won the Prix de Rome, which is when the French sculptors spent 3 years in Rome, and I think Houdon convinced, and I guess Clodion convinced their teachers to not draw, but to only work in models in clay. But they still had the fundamental principles of drawing in their head. I'm 100% sure that they'd studied drawing at the École for Paris.
Does anybody work with like 3D, like computer modeling?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's, that is, I think it's a good skill to have. I don't have it, but I think that there's always something better to work tactile in reality. Mm-hmm. You can become, very proficient in 3D and still have no idea how to make anything in clay. There's a kind of a disconnect mentally.
I see.
I've just heard this before. And my uncle's an animator, and he worked for Disney, and he's worked with people who knew how to model things in 3D, but they couldn't draw, really. I think there is something kind of separate within the digital realm. It's a good tool, but I don't know if it's a good thing unto itself.